Right now, we are in the early part of autumn and the days are getting shorter. The road traffic is heavier due to the combination of students and teachers returning to school and people returning to work from their summer vacations. All of this can make for a perfect storm that can make the commute to work trying, to say the least. For those choosing to get to work on their bikes, the trip to work means that utmost concentration and safe riding habits are key to arriving at work or home safely. This is increased exponentially when it comes to riding in the winter. Winter riding is fun and can be rewarding if the rules of the road are observed by cyclists and safety measures are used. And joining me here in the Classic 107 studio to talk about bike safety in the fall and winter, I am joined by Dave Elmore, who is a founding member of Bike Winnipeg and is the board chair for Bike Week Winnipeg. Hey, Dave, nice to have you back here in studio.
Nice to be here.
The last time we spoke was back in June. It was leading up to Bike Week. It seems to me that you use your bike as a primary source of transportation. How was the summer for you and getting around the city? How was that?
Well, generally, I think the summer was okay. The spring was rather wet, so it made it a little more of a challenge in terms of that aspect of riding in the rain all the time. But no, I thought the summer was okay for sure.
It seems that this spring and summer, cycling has been more in the news. I mean, there was that awful accident on Wellington Crescent, which is part of it. But what's been your sense? Has this year been better or worse for cycling?
It's interesting. I've always been one to say that cycling is pretty safe, and I've always been one in the over the years to say it's getting better. It's getting better. It seems to be we're getting more people. The more people we get on bikes, the safer it will be, and that is a proven concept. But yeah, I think that there's certainly a sense from what I'm seeing, from what I'm hearing from other people, what you see on social media, there does seem to be, I don't know, there's some angst out there for sure. I feel as though things are not as, maybe, and I kind of get the sense that maybe, this anger and frustration that's out there is just sort of spilling over into people's behavior on the road, and it's not just drivers, but I mean it's everyone, but I think it's or there's a potential for everyone, and not that it is everyone, of course, but I think there's some spillover there, and I think there's some frustration, and the more that it seems as though the more that that you see cyclists taking a stand on some subject or another, then there's a great big kickback because of it, right?
One of the things that you mentioned when you were setting up for this interview is that you are a CAN bike trained cycling educator. What is that, and why has it not taken hold here in Winnipeg, whereas it's taken hold in other cities?
Well, CAN Bike is Cycling Canada's. It's their program. I call it a knowledge and skills program. I don't call it a safety program, because that's really it is all about. It's about teaching people the knowledge and skills. In terms of it taking off here, I mean there are some alternatives that we'll talk about later. But I think for some people, it's you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people sort of approach it as it's as easy as riding a bike, right? And there's a lot of things that I would teach and that I do teach people that are not always that intuitive. And there's a lot of things that I think people overlook in terms of whether their position on the road and how they actually respond to the vehicles on the road. So, and I guess the other part of it is always, some kind of financial support. The CAN Bike program is a fairly extensive program. So as opposed to, again, there's some other programs that I've helped MPI develop, but I think that's also part of it too, is that, there's a lot of material that they cover, and not always an option to sort of jump in at a specific level. They want, you have to complete one level to go to the next level.
Yeah.
And so, again, some people I think would probably look at it and say, well, that's just too much time, too much effort.
Yeah. For you as a biking advocate, what are some of the most common bad habits that you see other cyclists do on the road with their bike to get people angry?
Well, I always, when I'm teaching, I always talk about communication as being a key, one of the key elements. It's one of the key elements, but for me, I've found it to be the key element. I often find that when I tell people what I want to do, when I show them by signaling where I want to go, oftentimes they'll actually let me go there. So I think that's one thing. I don't see a lot of people, communicating sometimes. People ride, and oftentimes people will ride too far over, right? They are trying to stay out of the way of cars, and so they ride too close to the curb, or they ride too close to parked cars, and they really need to take more space and be more visible,
right?
By taking that space. And of course, you do not want to necessarily be riding so close to the curb, and then when you have to avoid something, and we all know there's lots of somethings in the gutter, when you have to avoid, you have to move to your left, which means you're moving into traffic flow, as opposed to maintaining a meter away from a curb, which is what we teach. Staying a meter away from the curb and having room to maneuver. Right. The other thing, as I said, riding in the door zone. People ride too close to parked cars. If you hit a door, you're in for a world of hurt. And so I always tell people to stay outside the door zone. But the other thing that I also see is that unpredictable behavior. People weaving in and out. Right. So they weave in between the parked cars and then they come back out. They don't bother to look. They just pull out. It's a dangerous practice to take. And I'd say the last one really is sidewalks. People misunderstand the safety of sidewalks. They think a sidewalk is safe because they're away from cars. And I get that. But, of course, you have to interact with pedestrians as well.
Right.
And the other thing about, and this is proven by statistics, is that it's much more dangerous at intersections because people driving can't possibly sort of anticipate someone doing, 15 kilometers an hour down a sidewalk as opposed to a pedestrian walking at 2 or 3 kilometers an hour. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for that fast-moving traffic on a sidewalk. So that's another thing that, I think people have to understand that sidewalks are not always safe. And if you're going to ride on a sidewalk, then you need to ride at slow pace, and you need to really be cautious when you come to intersections. And, of course, it's illegal.
Yeah, there is that part of it, too. If you could narrow it down to just 5 or 10 things, are there 5 or 10 quick fixes that people can do to ensure that they're safe on their bike, whether it be helmets? Can you talk about some of those?
Well, helmets is a very divisive thing. I don't necessarily feel as though people have to wear a helmet. I don't want to tell people they have to. I always wear a helmet because the most common thing that happens is that people fall. It's not that they get into crashes with vehicles. They fall over or something, or they slip, and they come down, they hit their head. So that's kind of why I wear a helmet. But when it comes down to some simple things, I talked about it in the last question that you asked, and that was signal, communicate,
right.
communicate. It's important that you tell everybody where you want to go and how you want to go there. And as per that communication, you should never actually, whether it's change positions or even sticking your hand out to signal, you should never really do that without actually shoulder checking first and ensuring you know what's coming up.
Right.
The last thing you need to do is throw your hand out and have it slapped by the mirror of a car or a truck, Yeah. So you should never do that. You should. We talked earlier about how things seem to have changed in the last year or two, and maybe whatever's contributing factors to that. But I always tell people that you need to stay alert, really alert. You can never trust that a driver sees you. Eye contact is not a real thing. People wear sunglasses. People could seemingly be looking at you but not seeing you. And when I teach people, I always tell them, if you see a driver with their head moving from side to side, there's a good chance you're going to get lost in sort of a gap there.
Right.
So there's that part of it. I think you have to stay alert. You've got to be, call it head on a swivel, or as I was taught by when I took CAN bike, it was spidey senses, right?
Yeah.
Keeping your, and we have that opportunity and ability to do that because of the fact that because we are not surrounded by steel and glass. We hear and hear everything, and we can see everything if we're paying attention. I would say the other thing, and I mentioned about people riding too close to the curb, take your space.
Yeah.
Like stay a meter away from the curb. Stay well outside that door zone. I know it feels, especially if you're on a busier street, it feels a little bit, you get a little antsy when you're way out there because you're actually sitting out there in traffic.
Yeah.
But when you ride and you take more space, you have to understand that people have to pay attention to you more.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a meter away from the curb, you're not hugging that curb and allowing people to squeeze by you. When you're taking that space around the parked car, yes, you're staying outside that door zone, but you're also making yourself visible. And visibility is more than just the clothes you wear. Visibility is about being predictable, riding in a straight line, being consistent.
Yeah.
So if you have parked cars, even if the parked car is another half a block up, don't weave in. Just keep a straight line. Stay visible. Stay in the driver's field of vision. That's a key part of it. And there's the last one I would say is, when you're taking your space, sometimes you need to take a lane.
Yeah.
Today is a perfect example. We had a lot of rain. There's a lot of big puddles. Sometimes you've got to take more space on the road. You've got to get away from those puddles. You don't want to ride through a puddle because you don't know what's in that puddle.
Right.
And it could end up being, you end up wiping out. Construction zones, underpasses, those kinds of things. My rule is if I can't share the space, I simply won't share the space. I will simply take the space until I get through, and then I'll go back to my position on the right-hand side of the road.
Right. When I was prepping for the interview, one of the things I realized is that adults can take bike safety through MPI. Can you talk about those classes and some of the advantages to taking them?
Absolutely. MPI has two courses that they offer. One is the Cycle Champions course, which is usually anywhere from 6 to 7 hours of time, and the other one is the Bike It course. I actually helped them develop both of those courses, and they are based on the same philosophy as CAN bike. And so those courses themselves can be, you can get a course simply by contacting MPI, and I mean, if you Google Cycling Champions course, it'll come up with the MPI. It'll come up with MPI. You go to MPI and you'll find the email address to contact them. So you can get a course for 6 people or whatever. But the importance of them, I think, is that one, you're gaining the knowledge and understanding, a better understanding of where you should ride, how you should ride in traffic. Because let's face it, we don't have infrastructure everywhere, so we are going to be riding in traffic. And so you need to learn to be able to share that road and how you should share that road.
Right.
So again, I think that it's important that people learn those things. But the other thing about it too, and what makes it really, I think, really effective, is that it's both in class and it's on road.
Right.
So we take the in class and we talk about what needs to be, how you should approach different situations. And again, every situation is different, and there's no one solution all the time. But we give people the knowledge and understanding of how they should maybe approach things. And then we get out on the road and we actually do the actual riding. And where that sort of kicks in is that it kicks in because it allows people to either reinforce what we taught, or in a lot of cases, it actually is about breaking people's habits, because their habit is to ride too close to the car and ride too close to the curb. And even though we talked about it in the classroom, they'll go right back to it when they get out, because it's habitual, right? It's what they've always done. And so we stop and talk about it, and we try to change those habits. So I think that's where it's really important. And I've taught a lot of people who have a lot of experience, and at the end of the course, they say, yeah, I never really thought of doing that particular thing, right. Or I would have maybe done this, but I see what you're saying when this is a better option, Mm-hmm. So there's things, as I said earlier, that are not intuitive, and I think things that people could garner some knowledge and skills as well.
Yeah.
So.
As the days are getting colder, and they will soon be getting cooler, believe it or not, is there anything that you do to your bike to keep it in good running condition?
Well, one of the things that we actually teach as part of the courses with MPI or through CanBike is the ABC Quick Check. So it's just an ABC: air, brakes, chain and crank, and a quick check of your bike to make sure that everything is functioning properly, everything is in good shape. Winter riding can be another challenge altogether, but I think starting with an ABC quick check, and where you find problems, either if you can in fact make those changes or make those adjustments, then great. The other thing, of course, being that, when it comes to actual winter riding, there are some things that you may want to consider in terms of how you prepare your bike for winter, and not, you don't necessarily want to ride your nicest bike in winter, because it's pretty hard on a bike.
Yeah. So talk about some of the things that, you're like, are you talking about studs for the tires, or?
Well, that I think is necessary. There's lots of people out there that ride, and I rode for years without studded tires. But the moment I changed over to studded tires, it was like night and day. It increased my confidence tenfold, because you don't feel as though you're going to slip and slide around. So studded tires are important. The other parts I would say is choose a bike that you're not going to worry too much about, because you're not going to get a chance to clean it all the time. It can be really hard on bicycles, especially the salt, etc. Be prepared to keep that chain and that drivetrain lubricated, because again, things do rust up. And I sort of take a minimalist sort of attitude towards my winter bike. The less components, the better. Yeah. So I'm actually in the throes right now of finishing up a couple of winter bikes for people. And what I tell them usually is, the front derailleur, just get rid of it. You're not going to use it. Just put it on the middle ring and we'll put the rear derailleur on. An awful lot of people who ride in winter, once they figure out the gearing that they like, will just go to a single speed bicycle. And get rid of all the components that just get gummed up and don't work anyway.
One of the things that I've been dealing with, I bike to work every morning and bike home, is first thing in the morning, I'm dealing with people who are dressed in black, walking their dogs, or going for a run, or I've seen people on their bikes who are wearing nothing but black. Can you talk about lighting and just being seen with these shorter days, and the fact that we are going to be, if you are going to be biking, you're going to be biking in dark more frequently?
Yeah. Again, if you just go back to the Highway Traffic Act, it says that you have to have, when it gets dark after dusk, you have to have at least a white or amber light on the front, and you have to have a reflector. From my perspective, being seen is important, especially if you're going to be on the road. And so I think that whatever you can do and whatever you're comfortable doing that makes you more visible, whether it be adding again a flashing light on the back of your bike, reflective vest, reflective materials. One of the things that I do is that I wear reflective ankle bands because the flashing lights work okay, but as a car's coming up and they see these two reflective things popping up and down as I'm pedaling, it makes me very visible. Right. So I do things like that. I try to be as visible as possible. Sometimes I put those on my wrist so that when I put my hand out to signal, people can see it. Right. So again, it's about being visible, being seen, and whatever you can afford to do or whatever you feel you are comfortable with, great. Be more visible.
Absolutely. Dave, this has been fantastic to talk about all things biking. Where can people go to find out more about bike safety and perhaps learn more about it?
Well, I would say that, again, they can go to MPI. MPI has a fair amount of information on their website that is kind of based on this. It's based on the same thing that we teach during their courses, and something that I helped them develop initially, and they've, of course, developed and made it much nicer and prettier than what we initially had. So there's that option, and I think that it's also, if you are interested in taking a course, you can contact MPI, and they will set up a course. If you can arrange, like any organization, any group of a community group, you can get 4 or 5 people together. You can contact MPI and say, we'd like to have a course, and they offer up their facility for you so that you can go to their facility and you do the in-class, and then on-road routes are already developed for those things. So again, from a perspective of an instructor, I already know where I'm taking people, and I'm able to take people through a number of teaching moments, so that they can garner some benefit from what I'm teaching, and also sort of reinforce some of those things. But the other thing, you could go to the Bike Week Winnipeg website, and under resources, there's a number of resources there. And there's actually, I was talking about the ABC Quick Check. There is information on the ABC Quick Check. In fact, there's a video of doing an ABC Quick Check, which people could go to, and that'll help them understand a little bit about how they should maybe be checking their bike every once in a while to make sure that their bike is functioning properly.
Perfect. Dave, this has been so fun to have you back. Thanks for taking the time to bike here and talk to me today, and all the best on the road.
Thanks very much. I'm happy to be here.